As a professional musical theater performer and songwriter, I'm not exaggerating when I say the mystery of what is missing from Poison in comparison to other Hazbin Hotel songs has actually kept me up at night. I've seen fellow fans of the show say that it's soulless, that it lacks substance, or that you guys think it was specifically created to be Spotify bait. It's a song that deals with the most intense subject matter of the entire show, but yet uses cookie-cutter pop music instead of going the musical theater route in a musical theater show. The song has caused a lot of debate. Because there's such a noticeable difference in the style, a lot of people feel like it's out of place. But what if I told you that even if you do like the song, I have pinpointed one critical mistake which I believe is the source of this sentiment. And it's something that no one has said yet. The people that don't like the song have identified it, but they can't actually articulate what it is. When you look at why people don't like the song, if you follow the trail, you can find that this thing is at the heart of it. Through analyzing the instrumentation, rhythm, lyrics, and characterization, I'm going to go through what I think the song executed well from my academic POV, what it handled poorly, and then also its one fatal flaw. Good day, everybody. It is Calxiyn here, ready to nerd out on Calxiyn Cares Too Much about something that I am going to make you care about. First, we're going to cover the instrumental all at once. And for this instrumental, it does skew more towards a pop song compared to having a lot of the reactive musical theater elements that we would want a musical theater song to have. But does this cause the issue in question that I'm talking about, this one fatal flaw? Well, one of the reasons why I don't really like pop music as opposed to musical theater music is because musical theater songs tend to have more interesting compositions, while pop songs are very predictable. They have fewer instruments just because for pop singers, it's what you can find in a band as opposed to an orchestra pit, and they usually lack substance and storytelling, which makes them boring for me as a singer, but also as someone who clearly loves to analyze music. I also resent on what a production level a pop song being included in a musical usually means. Usually, it means that the higher-ups think that the audience is not willing to watch a musical. The audience are like fish. You must cast out your line, and the bait is a safe, shallow pop song, and that's the only way that you're going to get the fish to bite. The audience must be tricked. They must be fooled into caring, and I just find that really insulting. But was Poison created to trick people into watching a musical? Is it Spotify bait? There are still musical theater reactive elements, even if they are few. When the lights come on, there is something musically that is very well timed with the visuals. And for Angel Dust's second, yeah, in verse 2, there's something harsher in the drums compared to the previous lines. These opening verses have an ominous sound, as if something is lurking underneath the surface of dark water. And this brings a nice contrast to the full pop star mode that the chorus has. The instrumental conveys the idea of the performance and then the darker behind the scenes. And then after all that, the private moment that Angel Dust has alone and how these differ from each other. And everything stopping before he gets into the chorus is a nice reactive element as well. For a moment, it's like the world is silent as Angel Dust puts on his mask, and then the music changes to that bright pop sound. But the reason why I'm getting this out of the way now instead of doing the instrumental section by section like I usually do is because there's not a lot to chew on here. It has a lot of synthetic elements that I personally don't really like there's a snapping sound in the second half. I don't like artificial snapping. A lot of songs seem to use it these days. It's not something that you'd really find in a live theater setting, but it just sounds super fake. I don't understand why people have it. I just wish that they had done a better job of blending musical theater and pop music together like they did for Respectless, because in Respectless, Velvet has these nice violins, but then also the pop music sound. However, musical theater is about more than just the instruments. The pop music composition isn't enough by itself to explain why people are feeling the way that they are feeling. So let's get into the lyrics. Are they well written? Do they serve Angel Dust's character? Do they serve the narrative? Let's talk about it. So in terms of syllable count, things are more consistent here compared to other Hazbin songs. Even though there's this 12-13 situation between verse 1 and 2, they actually extend those and flashin' in a way where I think it goes unnoticed. Instead of cramming the syllables at the front like Stayed Gone does, this is the preferred way to handle a syllable count difference. When it comes to alliteration, or as I say, fun sounds, we have some nice, consistent consonant sounds with above, another, love, and lights. This all creates a nice flow, and then in the second verse, shoulda and spew create nice contrast. Even though should and spew do start with different sounds, it makes it more apparent that we are changing the tone to be more angry. Whereas this is, again, matchy-matchy, this is more contrasty-contrasty. Notice how in verse 1, the repeated use of another comes after above. So we have one line and then we have another. But in verse 2, we have shoulda and shoulda again. And so we may be expecting a third shoulda, because this is basically A, B, B, but this is B, B, A. Because of the established pattern, we may be expecting something else to happen, and that makes spew stand out a lot more. I don't actually mind that at the beginning here they went from ABB to this BBA, because even though it breaks the form, it has a nice purpose. Not everything that breaks the form has a good purpose, though. So let's talk about the rhyming. I do like above and a love. I think that's a really nice, clean internal rhyme. But my first criticism is that they didn't do it in verse 2. In the book Writing Better Lyrics by Pat Pattison, who teaches at Berklee College of Music, he basically says that form follows function, and this is something that I've heard before at musical theater school as well. Not necessarily attributed to him, but it's something that almost every songwriter subscribed to. All verses have the same function, so they should also have the same form, and you'll see that 99% of Disney songs do this, but Hazbin Hotel songs really struggle with this. And this idea of form follows function is the rationale behind rules that some of you seem to think are silly. I've gotten some comments from Hazbin Hotel fans who can't seem to take any criticism, saying, oh, well, why does everything have to rhyme? Who cares if the syllable counts don't match? Art shouldn't have rules, but these rules come from an understanding of human psychology, how music becomes catchy to people. And there are rules in everything, by the way. Music, character design, acting has rules as well. The rules can be broken, but you need to know what the rules are first. And so is the rule break here for a good reason? I would say no, and here's why. Here's a general reason, but we will get into something more specific later on. We want songs to be surprising, yet inevitable. We want familiarity so the audience can get lulled into this false sense of security, I always call it. We need that element of repetition so the audience can almost predict what happens next. But we also want to be surprised. So when the audience gets used to a song and feels security in where the song is going, that's when we add the pre-chorus. That's when we add the chorus. That's when we do something different. But if your verses don't match each other, and again, this is not the most egregious, Stayed Gone is much more egregious than this. If your verses don't match each other, the audience has nothing to get attached to. They basically have no foundation. You've given them nothing to hold on to. And the audience may have a hard time singing along, remembering the rhythm, and we've seen this a lot with covers of Stayed Gone. Everybody has a completely different rhythm. It's not just a choice, it seems to be a struggle. You can tell when people cover the song, they are struggling with the unnatural decisions that were made with the melody or how the lyrics flow. So all that to say, should and would rhyme, but shoulda has too much of a stress of the for it to be a perfect rhyme anymore. It's not the same as above and a love. Shoulda and would don't even sound like they share anything anymore. Sometimes songwriters need to kill their darlings. We may have a really clever idea, but if we can't do it twice, it's not that clever anymore. And this is the problem I find with a lot of Hazbin Hotel songs. You have these choices, which I'm sure they patted themselves on the back for, but then they can't replicate it. If you can't work to maintain that same sense of cleverness, it's not that great of a line to begin with, because then everything that happens afterwards falls flat. But just to talk about this part, I do like Flashing Lights compared to Roofless Nights. Flash has a very floaty sound to it, whereas Roofless has a harsher sound. And then Lights and Nights are a perfect rhyme. They both have the S, so we're good on that point. But again, when it comes to these structural issues, we have another issue here with Cash In and Flash In. They rhyme with each other because of how Angel Dust sings them. I'll give them that. Flash In as opposed to Flash-ing. Do not say Flash-ing. But then when we get down here to Happen, which again is fine because of how Angel Dust sings it. When we get to Happen, Cash In and happen is kind of a lazy rhyme. And you guys may be thinking, Cal, maybe they weren't supposed to rhyme. Maybe this isn't one of those cases where the beginning of the first verse rhymes with the beginning of the second verse. But to that, I would say that we're also missing the internal rhyme. Cash in, flash in, happen, nothing happens. So even if verse 1 and verse 2 were not meant to rhyme, verse 2 still doesn't have the clever internal rhyme that verse 1 has. And because of all of these reasons, verse 1 feels like a better version of verse 2. Verse 1 feels like the perfect verse, whereas this just feels like a draft that wasn't fixed. Remember 3 minutes ago when I talked about the form follows function thing and how there's a more general problem, but then a deeper, more important problem? I'm gonna talk about the more important problem now. A song needs to continue to build forward, not pull back. In theory, if you could reverse the verses, it would instead sound like we are building towards something. If we had verse 2 first and then verse 1 got more clever afterward, that would sound like we are growing in intensity. The problem is that it feels very noticeable when you take something away, when you remove something, when you have something that is very well constructed like this, and then in the second verse it just disappears. It's more noticeable. My point is that Angel Dust's exposition gets more intense, but the lyrics do not grow. Instead, they pull back. I do enjoy eyes and lies, though. That's really great to me. It's not like a mind-blowing rhyme or anything, but I love how these things are connected to each other through the fact that they rhyme. It stings because of how they are related to each other in the context of the narrative. And to do some lyric analysis specifically on that, Angel Dust can see in Valentino's eyes that he is a liar. And I really like this because they repeat red hot twice. And I think that that's a really good use of repetition because in this case it's not lazy. It actually has multiple meanings. The first time it happens, red hot is used as a description. Like if you told me that I have emerald green eyes, that's just descriptive. Red hot Valentino has red eyes. But red hot also means sexual appeal. So it's talking about what attracted Angel Dust to Valentino in the first place. It's passionate, it's sex appeal. It also means exciting and popular. So in just that word, we get the whole story. Angel Dust fell into lust with Valentino because of the lust in his eyes. And working for Valentino was this new, exciting opportunity, but red hot can also mean lying or emotionally charged with anger, and so that points to the abuse, and that's how it's different. We have a lot of double meanings there. We have red hot as in sex appeal, his eyes in the smoke literally glowing red. We have red hot as in fresh, exciting, and then red hot as in anger, and then the liar, liar, pants on fire thing that you usually associate with red hot and lying. And this creates a nice contrast between what Angel probably felt or thought when he first met Valentino compared to the reality of now, compared to what he realized over time. And then going back up here, obviously Flashin' Lights and Roofless Nights is about Angel Dust's profession. I don't think that I need to explain that too much. It's the stardom versus the behind the scenes. And I think the first lyric is interesting as well because Angel Dust is saying, money is money. I'll cash in on my good looks and my talent. I'm not above selling out, but now it's become twisted. Before it was Angel Dust's choice to cash in and use what he thinks he's good for, but now he has no choice anymore, and that's a very important distinction. And I find that really compelling in terms of being someone that likes to analyze lyrics. But what about the enemy of good lyricism? Yeah. A lot of you have been asking how I felt about these yeahs, and you guys know me so well already. I've only posted like 8 videos, I think. I don't know, but you guys know me so well. You knew I was gonna say something about this. But if you're new here, let me explain. I don't like la la la. I don't like ooh or whatever people do in the pop music. Whatever people do in the pop music. I sound like such a boomer. I'm sorry, but I don't like it. It's a pop music convention in musical theater. It's completely unnecessary. I mean, I think in pop music it's not necessary either. I have never heard something like this where it actually made sense. It's just filler words. But I think that I give this a pass for 2 reasons. First of all, this is a song to me that Angel Dust sings on stage stage based on the visuals of the show. And so I think it's more akin to a song in universe. It's a pop song that is being performed by Angel Dust. I can't criticize an orange for not being an apple, you know what I mean? I can't criticize it for not being an old school musical theater song if that's not what it wants to be. The rest of my criticisms that I make when it comes to rhyming structure, or other lyricism, or alliteration, or the syllables, whatever it might be, that's criticism I'm making to help the song excel at what it wants to do, where I think it made mistakes and fails at what it wants to be. However, the second reason is I think the yeah, yeah, yeahs have a hidden cleverness to it. It's not just there to fill up space. If English is not your first language, you may not know that yeah, yeah, yeah is something that we say when we dismiss something. For example, I may be like, yeah, 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 you don't need to tell me, I'll clean my room, I'll get to it, right? It means enough already, I get it, I know. So the first time it happens in this context, I interpret this as Angel Dust saying, you don't need to tell me, I know I fucked up, I know this is my fault because I'm not above what? I'm not above a love to cash in. I'm not above selling out, and so now I'm in this situation, I get it, yeah, 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 you don't need to tell me. But the second verse is Angel Dust explaining why he was tricked. So the second time the yeah, yeah, yeah happens, to me, I feel like it's actually towards Valentino in Angel Dust's head. And the framing of this also conveys that because he's looking at Valentino as he says that. And this gives depth to that part of the song. It's like, yeah, 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 I've heard your lies before, Valentino. I don't buy it anymore. I don't believe you. So I actually think that this gives a lot of depth to this part of the song. But what about the rest of it? As I already mentioned in the pre-chorus, I like how everything slows down. I like how all the sound is sucked out of the room before the performance starts, but we're still missing some nice instrumental stuff to talk about, so that's all I'll say. For the pre-chorus, what's and worse has really nice alliteration here. But when it comes to rhyming, let's talk about hell and myself. Because they don't perfectly rhyme, however, I don't actually mind this. In Stayed Gone, something like proports and support sounds weird instead of purport and support because the stress messes up the rhyme, and it's extra unnecessary because they could have just changed the tense to make it perfect, and it's structurally inconsistent because Vox's version of this same part has a perfect rhyme. If form follows function, the verses should have the same rhyme structure. That's why it's bad in that song. The other reason why I don't like it in that song is because proports and support, it's supposed to be building upwards, yet something has been taken away. Something has been removed. It makes support sound less important, even though Alistair is posing this question. It's supposed to be a gotcha moment. It's not, is Vox as strong as he purports the gotcha? It's, or is it based on his support? That's the gotcha. That needs to be the thing that's stressed. But instead, support sounds less important because purports has this weird stress at the end. You won't find a back-end difference in musical theater songs very often because lyricists tend to want to keep a perfect rhyme. But, for example, a song that does a building thing without sacrificing the rhyme is Mad Hatter, just a song I like from Wonderland, and it's I'll do the rest as soon as you've acquiesced. And that is a perfect rhyme. The difference between the one-syllable rest and acquiesced shows us how it's building towards something. We add something if we want something to build, and that's why that Alistair part in Stayed Gone sounds so clunky. If it was, I can only blame myself for being stuck in this hell, that would sound wonky. But I think that this actually works because what it does is what's the worst part of this hell, which is one step on the stairs, I can only blame myself. And that's adding something. It's emphasizing the point to the viewer because now we hear the difference. Whereas if it was something like, what's the worst part of this hell, it is my fault that I fell, that doesn't really sound good to me. It has a perfect rhyme, but you lose harshness. It's too perfect. So in this case, what this does well is having something that you expect to be rhymed perfectly, hell and fell, and instead doing myself, right? And then you have that F, and that's the emphasis, that's the harshness, that's making the point to the viewer that myself is more important than the hell. It's one thing to be in hell, it's a totally different thing for you to have put yourself there. This intentional imperfection draws attention to the fact that Angel is imperfect. imperfect, that he made an imperfect choice. And the lyrics do a great job to characterize angel dust. And blame just does something to me because we have what's in worst, and then blame really comes out of nowhere, which I think is really nice. It's not something that we've really heard in the previous verse in terms of alliteration. To briefly talk about the instrumental again, we have a fuller instrument sound in the chorus. There's some twinkly stuff happening here that makes it feel less murky, more pop star. We're on the stage. Again, I don't like some of the fake clapping. It happens in the second part too. I don't like it, but this melody has a catchy pop song melody to it. When it comes to the syllable count here, I'll be honest, I did not know how to categorize this up. In terms of the bar, is it I can't help but swallow up your poison, or is it up your poison, right? To me, it sounds like up your poison in terms of how it's written. I think that that was supposed to be the intentional outcome, that it was supposed to be I can't help but swallow, and then you have this lift, up your poison, to make it 4. And that would make some sense because up your poison, I made my choice in, and it is pronounced like in, even though it's and we'll get to that in a second. It extends in a way that makes these match, even though the syllable count is different, so I feel like that this was the intended choice. For alliteration and fun vibes, I really like the F for feed in and feel in, but I also like that they share some of the same middle. Obviously, they don't share the D and the L, so they aren't a perfect rhyme, but it's some nice alliteration here for them to share most of the same letters together. And then for alliteration, we also have made my, livin' like, and I think that that has a lot of intensity to it, so that's really nice. In terms of rhyming, we're getting a little bit loose with what counts as a rhyme here, but that's not unusual for pop music, so again, I'm gonna keep in mind the fact that this is a convention of the genre and not judge it too harshly, but I will say that poison and choice N only works if you pronounce it like angel dust. So if you're doing a cover or whatever, it sounding good relies on singer's choice. So make sure that you say, I made my choice N to rhyme with poison, right? Swallow and tomorrow, again, slant rhyme territory, but it's similar to hell and myself. It makes tomorrow stand out a little bit more, so I think it's fine. It's a build on swallow versus a reduction. And to do a bit of a lyric analysis here, we have poison in the literal sense because Valentino has moth perfume, pheromones. Like, they never talk about this outright in the show, but Velvet does sell some sort of love potion, and the theory on the streets is that it's made out of Valentino's pheromones. So I think that it's literally poison. I guess they just milk him or something, but anyway. But it's also emotional poison as well, and I feel like these lyrics really convey how Angel Dust knows that this is toxic, but this is the only way he thinks he's capable of being loved, even though he knows it's not real. It's sort of like love bombing. In the moment, someone's giving you a lot of gifts, a lot of attention, a lot of presents, and it seems actually like love. It may seem like an action of love. You may feel loved, but on the other person's end, it's not actually coming from a place of love. Actions do not always illustrate the intent, and so even though Angel Dust knows that it's not real, it feels real sometimes, just for that moment. It's like he feels like he has nothing left without it. So he may as well numb himself to have whatever this is, and I feel like there's something so raw about that. So moving on to the post-chorus, there is something weird happening syllable-wise with this. However, it matches the other time that the post-chorus comes in, so Poison wins this one, because even if the structure is weird, it kept its weird structure twice, perfectly the same, so I guess that it gets away with it this time. And we have some fun alliteration here with way, want, baby, and be. I don't think that me and be were supposed to be an actual rhyme, so I'll categorize that as having a nice internal sound, and then end and dead has a very similar, it's a sing-songiness to it, like how we say, oh, this is a dead end, we say those words together, but it's not a perfect rhyme. Speaking of rhyming, I thought I was going crazy when I realized that nothing actually rhymes here. I was expecting something like, any way you want me, baby, that's the way you got me, baby. That's a very common thing that happens in pop. Or any way you want me, baby, that's the way you got me crazy lately, or some variation of that. You guys may be thinking that it's baby and me's the rhyme, but that doesn't count as enough of a rhyme, so I don't think that it's that. I actually choose to believe that this is an intentional snub. The syllable count here is different enough that I think it's actually supposed to be a narrative clue. It's not that baby and me was the rhyme, but there's actually something missing here. And I think that it doesn't match up because Angel Dust's affection for Valentino actually goes away. Valentino cuts him off mid-sentence, and instead Angel has to grovel and say, "I'll be yours." So this first line is at the beginning of the interactions. This is Angel Dust throwing himself at Valentino, for example. And then you have "That's the way you got me," and you expect that Angel Dust would have said baby again, but in this line, he finds out who Valentino really is, and that's why we have "I'll be yours. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to insult you." It's almost like you can imagine right here that Valentino was like, "What do you mean you're offering yourself to me? I don't get things given to me. I take what I want." That's how Valentino's mindset is. Like, how dare Angel Dust presume that Angel Dust needs to offer himself, right? It's almost like, you don't need to offer yourself. I already own you. I can take what I want anytime I want. And so I think that that's the sort of dynamic here. That's why this line is cut off. And there's something about the note progression on "Yours" that is just so heartbreaking. It hurts, like there's something that twists it. But going back here to the O's, because you guys may think, again, similar to the Yaz, do we like this? Is this necessary? I think that this actually has a narrative purpose. Like I said, I will defend the O's this time. There are some other Hazbin songs where they don't need to do this and they do it anyway, but here it makes sense. And without getting too explicit, this is a noise that someone may make in an intimate situation, but it could also be a cry of pain or anguish. So I actually think the O's in this case are very clever. It's like how we use "oh" or "whoa" in musical theater. So I think that this is a very clever use of it here. It has a nice double meaning, and then you feel the pain of it. Now we're at the point of the video where the expectations have been built. So what about the second half of the song? Does the second half deliver on these expectations? And we still haven't quite run into the problem that I've alluded to yet, so let's keep going. Touching briefly on the instrumental again, I don't like the artificial snapping. It gets on my nerves. The only reason I'm forgiving this is because it may convey that Angel Dust is being controlled. Valentino is actually snapping at him, and it shows up very briefly, so fine, whatever. So in terms of the syllable count here, I think it's similar enough to get a pass just because we're taking the formatting from verse 2, and we're taking the 13 syllable from verse 2, but we're taking the 9 from verse 1, and so I feel like that it's the same enough that it's not really noticeable, nothing sounds out of place, and again, it's that surprising yet inevitable. There's a bit of a difference here, but it's not too much, because we want verses to have the same function, again, form, function, all that sort of thing. I really like the alliteration here with the got and good, and then disassociate, disappear, as well as what and wanna. And unlike verse 2, this actually keeps the internal rhyme intact. We have untrue and you, and then cash in and flash in, again, as we mentioned before, and then here and disappear is also kept intact, which again, verse 2, what were you doing? Because this was able to keep it, but verse 2 did not keep it in. And so this is really nice, though, that they were able to maintain the structure. And in terms of a lyric analysis, this has the same impact as verse 2 in terms of placement, with the repetition and then the break of that repetition. If the first verse is how Angel Dust got into the situation, and then the second verse is how Valentino manipulated him, this is about how Angel Dust is trying to embrace the persona, to make this fake persona to be able to handle it. He needs to disassociate and disappear, or else he won't be able to cope. And I feel like that in this case, as we've talked about the yeah before, this is actually like, yeah, like this is supposed to be more desperate this time. He's trying to convince himself that he can do it, or he's smug that he's fooling Valentino, if you want to call it that. So again, the yas serve a narrative function. And to rapid fire through the pre-chorus, we have the same syllable count here, so we are all good. We have difficult, which fits into disassociate and disappear, even though it's from the previous line up there. I still think that it sounds nice. And we have the imperfect rhyme. Again, we have difficult and then gulp. But I think that, again, this works because it remains within the structure the song already established. established. And then similar to blame up here, resist sticks out in a very similar way. In terms of the lyrical meaning, we can really take this in two ways. So far, comma, beyond difficult to resist another gulp. As in, so far, in terms of time, it's not working. Since he's been at the Hazbin Hotel, so far, not so good. You know how people say, so far, so good, so far, not so good. It's not working. He can't. But it could also be so far beyond difficult, it's beyond difficult, and beyond difficult is impossible. So you can really choose your meaning with that, or it's a double meaning. It's supposed to mean both things. And I like that because it's so far since I've been here at the Hazbin Hotel, I haven't been able to escape yet, but then it's so far out of reach. It's so far beyond difficult. I can't do it. So moving on to the course, structurally, we are practically the same. Everything works itself out bar-wise. There isn't anything extremely jarring here like there are with some of the other songs. And then alliteration-wise, I really like chokin' and choice. That's really nice. Wasted, taste, even though, again, it's not supposed to be a rhyme. Like, waste and taste would usually be a perfect rhyme, but it's like the feed in and feel in from before. It's not supposed to be a perfect rhyme. It's supposed to just have a shared little amount for a nice sound. And then the rhymes are the same. But in terms of the lyrical meaning, though, I feel like the changes made further the idea that maybe at first being with Valentino was addicting, like a rush, but now it's actually harmful to him. He can feel the effects on his body. Instead of being addicted like he was before, he's choking. We have that difference. And instead of living like there's no tomorrow, it's now wasted like there's no tomorrow, which is different. If you're living like there's no tomorrow, that means it's carpe diem, seize the day. I'm gonna have fun while I'm still alive, which is also kind of funny because they're dead, but now it's wasted like there's no tomorrow, and that's to forget. And the post-chorus here is actually exactly the same. But I'm sure by now you guys are thinking to yourself, like, Cal, you alluded to this mysterious thing that's missing from the song. When are we gonna get there? The song's almost over. And actually, a hint of it is in the outro. In terms of the instrumental, it's very pulled back here. It feels less murky than before, and also feels more private than the chorus or even the verses. Everything else was a performance, but this is angel dust when he's alone, and the soundscape of the song here reflects that. In terms of the syllable count and the structure, this is the outro, so it doesn't need to follow what we've already heard before. However, it does pull from things that we've heard before, like hollow and tomorrow. Before that would have been swallow, right? And so it's earned the change. It's still familiar, but now it's switching up on us. When it comes to the alliteration here, we have fill in and full, and that's almost similar to the feel in, feed in from earlier in the course. And then we also have sick and something, and I feel like that alliteration sounds especially good because these things are connected. Being sick is what makes him wish for something to live for. And then the rhyme structure here is also the same, just instead of choice in, we have poison twice and then hollow tomorrow. Since we heard swallow twice, we may be expecting it again, but it instead subverts our expectations. But I do have some beef in terms of the actual meaning of the lyrics. So in Stay Gone, we talked about sugar on the cream, and also your medium is getting bloody rare. And I talked about why I think that those are a little bit like, that doesn't exactly work. Filling up my glass, but it's always hollow feels really strange. Like you can't just take two different phrases and mash them together, right? There's the imagery of a glass, but hollow doesn't really work for me when in English we don't really talk about things that hold liquid that way. Glasses are not hollow. They are either empty or they are full, or they are overflowing, or they're half full. When something is hollow, that means it has like an exterior and an empty interior. I don't know, like a pumpkin, for example. A pumpkin, if you carve a pumpkin and take out the pumpkin guts, then the pumpkin is hollow because it has like a shell, skin, and it used to be full, and now you've taken it out and it's hollow. But when we're talking about glasses or cups, a glass isn't hollow, a glass is empty. And I know that they want the idea of angel dust feeling hollow. Like, despite all this from Valentino, he isn't actually filled with love, but that's not what they said, okay? Despite what we may be able to assume, that's not what they said. They want the idea that Angel Dust keeps drinking this up but still feels hollow in his heart, but what they wrote doesn't actually make any sense. They should have said, I'm filling up my glass, but I'm always hollow, because that would make more sense. I know that it's like, oh, but then you're explaining and you're hitting the audience over the head, but sometimes it's better to hit the audience over the head than write something that just doesn't make any sense. Or they could have done, but I feel hollow, and then we get fillin', full. That would have been a nice alliteration, and this would describe that Angel Dust feels hollow in a way that's less clunky, because I know what they mean, but in an attempt to, I guess, subvert the obvious, like they didn't want to make it sound too basic, they actually made something that doesn't make any sense, and it's such a careless mistake because you can just change the it's to I'm, and it's fixed. And that's where the song ends, but clearly it's not where this video ends, so what's missing? Clearly it's not mindless, like I normally complain about pop songs for being mindless or shallow, because the lyrics ignited my curiosity. We've been talking about them for a long time. There's depth in those choices. The imperfections are intentional instead of lazy, except for that weird thing at the end there, and even though I don't love the instrumental, I still see why this instrumental was used to convey what is in this song. So what's the problem? Before I reveal it, I just want to say thank you so much for getting to this part, and thank you to all the patrons and YouTube members for supporting my videos. If you guys think that this explanation was worth the wait, so to speak, please consider supporting me like those patrons and YouTube membership members do. You'll be able to see videos early, and I'll be able to keep making them. So let's get into what it is. I think the reason why people think something is missing from the song is because something is. Something that only shows up at the very end. And this is what's making the song feel shallow or empty or lazy to some people. It's not the fact that it's a pop song.
This is a classic kind of song. The Disney version of saying the beginning of every film of the classic fairy tale. There's a version of this song.
This is the moment in time where the audience just falls in love with your character. And the way that they fall in love with you is because you want something. And there's some sadness, there's a little bit of longing, and there's just some kind of way that you can connect with the audience. It's that simple little vulnerability.
This kind of song exists in the Broadway musical from Wouldn't It Be Loverly, Eliza Doolittle, and My Fair Lady, tells us what she wants, Rodgers and Hammerstein. Every show, the leading lady has a chance to plunk herself down on a tree trunk somewhere and to sing about what she dreams about. And she sings, this is what I want in life. It's called the Girl's I Want song.
But the leading lady sits down on something and sings about what she wants in life, and the audience falls in love with her and then roots for her to get it for the rest of the night. An I Want song is supposed to be where the hero expresses their hopes and dreams and what they want out of life. And it's so we, as the audience, understand those dreams, because understanding those dreams is the only way for the audience to get more involved in the character's quest to get there. This is the reason why people think the song is empty, because it's not an I Want song. It's a this is what Valentino did to me song. And it's a major musical theater crime, if you want to call it that, to have a song be able to be cut and the audience still understand the story. Think about the script of episode 4 in Hazbin Hotel. If the song was cut, I still understand everything in the story because we see Valentino's abusive, we know Valentino owns Angel, Huss calls out Angel Dust for acting fake, and this doesn't happen after the song, this happens before the song starts. We have already seen the abuse taking place. We already understand how Angel Dust got here. This song is about stuff that we already know. A natural progression forward would have been to learn about what Angel Dust dreams about leaving this abuse for, not just regurgitating the stuff that we've seen in previous scenes. And don't get me wrong, an I Am song does have a place, but the difference between most I Am songs and this song is that the I Am song shows a different side to a character or introduces a character we've never seen before. For example, in Beauty and the Beast has this song in the musical version called If I Can't Love Her. And at this point, we've only seen the Beast as a monster, as this ferocious, angry jerk, basically an asshole. And so I Can't Love Her actually shows that he basically wants to unalive himself. He wants to die. It's very sad, and it's very, not jarring in a bad way, but it's a wake-up call to the audience. Oh, this character isn't actually a monster. They're very much hurting. They have this deep emotional pain, and that's what a good I Am song is. It's either an introduction or it's, you thought this character was like this? No, 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 no. This is what they're really like. The problem is that this song doesn't do any of those things. It's not an I Want song, but it's also not an I Am song. Apparently Angel Dust has a whole ass sister that's never mentioned in the show at all, and we see her very briefly, and I guess when the show was still in pilot, she was revealed at some point, and then we see her later on in the series in heaven, and it's never talked about. This song could have been about reuniting with his family someday. It could have been similar to Audrey's song from Little Shop of Horrors, where she is also being abused, but it tells us what Audrey dreams about in terms of having a loving husband, having children, getting out of Skid Row. That is what the whole show is about. We want to get out of Skid Row. We want the white picket fence sort of life. This could have been like Proud of Your Boy from Aladdin, where Aladdin talks about, Mom, I know that I've screwed up. I know that I've caused you all these problems, but I am going to change. It could have been anything else, but instead we rehashed the same information we understand already. And as a result, the song feels like it lacks purpose. It's just there to be a spectacle, which I think is part of the reason why so many people think that it's shallow or soulless, or that they just made it to get on Spotify, because there's actually no reason for the song to be here. A musical theater song needs to give us more than what we already know, and this song gives us nothing that dramatically changes my view on Angel. We already feel bad for him. We felt bad for him all the way up until the point where this song happens. If this song happened at the beginning of this episode and then we saw all the bad stuff, maybe it would be different, but they've already shown us all of the things that they sing about, so it doesn't really make any sense. They really squandered their chance here because they focused the song on Angel Dust's fake persona instead of showing that there is more to him than his fake persona. Obviously, you may like Angel Dust's characterization in terms of the wider show, but looking at the song in a vacuum, the only reason why we feel for Angel Dust is because we feel bad for him. We're angry for him. We're sad for him. He's been objectively wronged. He's not a shitty person. The way he behaves, like us saying that he's fake, it's just to cope with the hand that he's been dealt. But I don't think that based on this song in a vacuum, compared to other musical theater songs in a vacuum, you can actually fall in love with Angel Dust through this song, because it's just a pity song. At the very end of the number, Angel Dust says that he wishes he had something to live for, but he doesn't actually identify what that thing is. And so that's what's missing. What does this character actually want out of life? Or in this case, their afterlife. That's what gets us to root for the character. We feel bad for the character, but how can I root for Angel to get what he wants if they don't even identify what he actually wants throughout the song? We're always going to feel bad for a character like that, but that sort of arc does not require the same work. Quasimodo wants to go out there. Hercules wants to go the distance. Ariel wants to be part of your world. And it's funny how the title of the songs are also what they want. Isn't that interesting? But Angel Dust relies entirely on this pity. Logically, we understand Angel Dust wants to get out of the abusive situation, but for what? Quasimodo's song doesn't just revolve around Frollo and how shitty Frollo is. Same thing with Ariel. It doesn't just focus on Triton and how terrible Triton is. Imagine if part of your world was a rant about Triton is terrible, or again, out there from Hunchback, an entire rant, Frollo is terrible, and they just ended with, I want more, instead of identifying what the what is. The what is what gives the character their soul, and that's what's really missing here. Howard Ashman and these other Disney songs, they had to earn why the audience should believe the character should get what they want. Why is it Ariel's God-given right to go up to that human world, despite us as the audience knowing how terrible humans are in real life, having this uphill battle of the audience thinking it would be so much cooler to be a mermaid. In Hercules, all we've seen up until this point is Hercules fucking everybody up. He has this scene where his strength causes the collapse of this market this local market in their town, and everybody's businesses for that day basically fall apart. He wrecks everybody's produce, and we're supposed to believe that it's Hercules' God-given right to be a hero and go the distance? When they wrote these songs, they had to work to earn something. That's why songs like Part of Your World are the heart of the entire story. It's not just because we feel bad for Ariel, but because Ariel has a moment of vulnerability with us where we're able to open up and feel vulnerable as well. And she argues why in that moment she should get her dream. I imagine that some of you may hear this and think, well, obviously Angel Dust doesn't think that there's a way to get out. He doesn't sing about his hopes and dreams because they're in hell. Everything sucks. But again, there are other musical theater characters that's the point. Even though everything sucks, they persist. They still dream. And that's why I'm a little bit concerned about this. Not just in Hazbin Hotel, but just as a trend in general in other musicals as well. It's commiserating. It's not empowerment. Is the reason why this song is so relatable to people because the audience doesn't think it's possible to escape from the problems in their own lives? Is there no point in hoping? I just feel like it's very bleak that people think, yeah, that makes sense, because the entire point of musical theater before, or at least stories in this vein, was that, yeah, everything sucks, but we persist, we still dream, we still hope, and now people are like, yeah, it makes sense that there's no hope, and I'm just like, that's not good, bestie, we all need therapy, bestie. There's just such a big difference between writing a song that revolves around a character, that revolves around what you've been told happens to them in the script, and then writing a song that gives the character their soul. And I feel like that this song just doesn't do that. This song did not give Angel Dust the same soul as those other characters I mentioned. And I just wonder if there's some generational difference in why we're okay with that. I come from that time, again, not to sound like a boomer, I come from that time of the hopefulness of the musical theater songs that have that. But you'll notice lately a lot of musical theater songs are just commiserating, are just things suck, and the entire song is just how things suck. Does that reflect something in us that we just feel angry? I don't know. But I feel like at the end of the day, this had the opportunity to be more interesting, to be more engaging, and to be more complex and nuanced, and it just didn't take that chance. But if you want to see the example of a song that balances the I want and I am, well, you guys can check out my video about why Respectless was almost perfect. Thank you to all my patrons and YouTube members again for supporting me. This has been Calxiyn caring way too much and my analysis of Poison, and I will see you next time. Bye!